What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, we got a great midweek episode coming your way today. We're going to talk a little Islam Makhachev. Carlos Prates is who he thinks is the rightful next opponent. Prates just signed a new 8-fight deal and says he was promised by the UFC brass that he is, in fact, next. We'll get into some of the stuff he said in his interview. Deen the Great versus Henry Cejudo is on the books. He said he was fighting a UFC fighter next, and it looks like it's going to be the former 125 and 135 champion in Henry Cejudo. We're also going to talk a little Alex Pereira. He hasn't been in the news cycle for a few weeks, but Glover Teixeira came back and said in a recent interview that heavyweight is still the move, 3 belts is still the goal, and Josh Hokit is probably the next opponent. We're going to get into a little bit of the UFC Noche fallout, Yair Rodriguez pulling out. Looks like Jose Delgado may be in against Jean Silva, as well as many other things, Arman Tsarukyan, etc. Everything in the timestamps below so you'll know exactly where each conversation in this longer form conversation lives. But Nick, let us get started with, Islam Makhachev is the biggest news of the week,
Sure.
Defending his belt now at 170. First title defense at 170, looked really good against Ian Machado Gary, who just kind of fell flat and didn't do a whole lot in there. Now, Carlos Prates said in an interview that a lot of people actually do believe that, Michael Morales would be a harder fight for Islam. And he's like, yeah, Michael may be a little bit bigger than me, and I think that's why people think that.
Yeah.
They say he's got good grappling, but I haven't really seen any great grappling out of him. Yeah, he's got power, but he said, I would light him up on the feet, is basically what Prates said. His striking, he believes, is light years ahead of Michael Morales's, and he believes because he has that ability to connect with clean strikes and get knockouts that he's actually the best, not just the rightful number one contender, which I believe he is, but also the best stylistic matchup for Islam, he believes, is him. As well, now he's got a new 8-fight deal. He's being paid more. He's feeling like he's ready with the amount of money that he's making to become a champion and run as a champion. Thoughts on Prates being next? Thoughts on his new deal? And do you agree that he's light years ahead of Michael Morales as far as striking is concerned and is, in fact, the more dangerous opponent for Islam?
Yeah, Carlos Prates versus Islam Makhachev is the right next fight. I know a lot of people were saying Morales should get it, but Morales' strength of schedule since he's been in the UFC isn't near as tough as Carlos Prates. And I know he's got that 18 or 19-0 record. It looks really good on paper, but a lot of those came from outside of the UFC, and Carlos Prates has basically beaten 2 former champions since the last time we saw Morales fight. So I think on merit, you kind of do have to give it to Prates. And one thing I really enjoyed seeing out of his training footage, apparently he's at the PAI and he's already training for Islam Makhachev, which is nice because he did tell us after his Jack Della Maddalena win that he was going to take the rest of the year to go party and have some fun. But it looks like he's locked in and ready to take on the champion sometime early 2027. I can't wait to see that fight. He was showing knees up the middle, which if you're dealing with a guy like Islam Makhachev, it's very difficult to avoid getting taken down. But you can always show them a couple things that might cause a little bit of pause out of a guy like Islam. And that's a knee up the middle, it's uppercuts, and I saw both of those taking place when he was hitting mitts at the PI. I think the content came out yesterday.
Yeah.
And so I love that because even if you're just feinting the knee coming up the middle, or even if you're just feinting the uppercut, that will give pause to a grappler who is going to change levels, shoot in, close distance, and try to take you down. We didn't see any of that out of Ian Gary. Ian was very stationary. He was very stagnant, and he basically just used a jab and threw a bunch of naked kicks to the head. I think Carlos Prates is going to utilize his footwork. I think the fact that he comes from a very credentialed and high-level kickboxing and Muay Thai background, I mean, for God's sake, he's got Muay Thai tattooed across his chest, tells us that he is the most elite striker at 170, maybe the most elite striker on the roster right now. He's at least in the conversation. So I really think that they're seeing it the same way I see it. Carlos Prates has a better strength of schedule in the UFC. I understand he lost to Ian Gary, but aside from that, he's looked pretty damn unstoppable. And he's a much bigger star than Michael Morales. Us hardcore fans, we know Michael Morales. We know how big of a problem he is. He may, in fact, be the toughest matchup for Islam at 170, but Carlos Prates has the most entertaining style maybe in the UFC. His lifestyle outside of the cage is something that fans can't seem to wrap their head around. Even Islam, he's like, I don't get it. He can eat Nutella cake and he can smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol and still perform at this level. I just don't understand. So he's sort of like an anomaly for us. And, you know, he also is a significantly bigger star. So I just see Michael Morales having to do a little bit more work than Prates has already done. He's laid the foundation. He has earned his title shot. I really think early 2027, we'll see him face off with Makhachev. And look, Makhachev is clearly going to have a big skill advantage when he gets the fight to the ground. And if he does win this fight, it'll likely be a submission or something on the ground, because I just don't think Carlos can deal with him down there. But on the feet, Carlos Prates is going to give him hell.
Yeah, Carlos Prates is the rightful next opponent for Makhachev for sure. Am I sold on what he said, that he's potentially more of a stylistic nightmare for Islam than Michael Morales? I don't think I'm sold on that. I think Michael Morales actually is the tougher opponent for a couple of different reasons. One being just sheer size. He's enormous. You know, he's got good offensive takedowns. I know Prates said that he's never seen Michael Morales do takedowns before, go for takedowns. But if you watch him on the Contender series, he had a hell of a couple of slams and some good takedowns there. So Michael Morales, he's got a judo background. He's got a wrestling background. And now it's not to the level near what Islam's is. But when you're talking about a massive human being who will probably have, I mean, let's be real, maybe a 20 to 30 pound advantage when the cage door shuts. I can't imagine that he's much less than 195 come fight night.
And Islam also said after beating Ian Gary, he goes, I think I'm going to need to put on a little bit more weight for my next title defenses because the guys in the division are just so big. I don't think he was specifically thinking about Carlos Prates. I think he was thinking about Michael Morales.
Definitely. And, you know, Carlos Prates in that Jack Della Maddalena fight where he looked damn near flawless on the feet, he looked also a little bit vulnerable as far as takedowns are concerned. We saw what Islam did to Jack. We saw what Islam did to Ian, and I think Ian's got really stellar takedown defense. I mean, it took Islam multiple attempts in multiple different rounds to get the control time. Now, did he get the control time? He did. He always does.
The first takedown looked so easy, and then the rest of the fight, you know, he did have to work a little bit harder. But that first takedown on Ian was so impressive. I was like, oh, man, if this is the story for the rest of the fight, Islam's going to control as long as he wants to every single round.
What did I tell you? Heavy in the front leg, opposite stance, single
right.
leg all day. But, you know, when you go back and watch Prates versus JDM hit a pretty clean double leg. Now, Prates got up. Nothing happened as a result of it. But when you watch that, you got to think to yourself, man, in what world does Islam not get Prates down? Now, we still need to see the fight. Because you could easily turn around and make the argument, what world does Islam get, and in what world does Islam get out of a fight with Prates when he lands some straight punches to the face like Ian Gary landed, and Islam's face was busted up. Now, I know there was a headbutt that did the damage to the nose, but there was more than just that headbutt that took place as far as doing damage on the face of Islam Makhachev.
Usman Nurmagomedov even came back and was talking to Islam after the fight, and he goes, brother, you cannot go home and see your mother looking like that. Like, and it's probably jarring for their parents because they usually don't wind up getting much damage on their face or, you know, visual stuff that you can see, bruises and bumps. But Islam Makhachev left there the cage with a few scratches, and Usman was like, bro, that is not like us. You cannot go back home looking that way.
Well, we know that, you know, Islam's mom is not a fan of what he does for a living, but, you know, and this goes back to the whole argument. A lot of people are having it after the fight, you know, who has the better resume, Islam or Khabib? For sure, Islam. Go find a picture of Khabib's face looking like Islam's in the Dustin Poirier fight, in the Ian Gary fight, in the Volkanovski fight, you know. So the dominance of victory. Now, I know Khabib didn't have the level of competition that Islam had, but, you know, that's kind of a separate point. When you think about the Carlos Prates fight, what intrigues me is that I think either way it lands, we're going to see Islam's first finish at welterweight. It'll either be him getting finished with devastating strikes at the hands of Carlos Prates, or Carlos Prates getting submitted. I don't think Carlos Prates is going in there to play the safe game. Which means that he's going to take more chances, which, you know, the flip side of that coin is that you open yourself up for potential submissions, especially when you're fighting somebody like Islam. So, you know, I do think for the first time we will see a finish and an Islam Makhachev 170 title fight. I just don't know which way it'll go.
Yeah, and I'm very intrigued by the MMA community as a whole, because the general consensus is that Michael Morales deserves it over Carlos Prates, and I just disagree. I think Islam Makhachev is a guy who likes a fair and balanced meritocracy to get to the rankings, climb yourself up, get to a title shot once you've earned it. Jack Della Maddalena and Leon Edwards are both the last two fights that Carlos Prates had. Those are two former world champions. And I understand that maybe Leon hasn't looked great lately, and Jack Della Maddalena doesn't look like the man that got to the belt on a 17-fight win streak. But what are we looking for out of a world title fight? Islam Makhachev is one of the biggest stars that the sport has ever seen. He's just, you can't help but love the guy. And it feels to me like the world just wants to see Islam lose rather than give the rightful guy the next shot. And I think that people stylistically see Morales as a tougher match. But at the end of the day, it's not just, let's just get this champion beat, because then the UFC's got to start all over with marketing now a new champion. And look, there's no wrong answer here. I do like Michael Morales. I think that if he were to step in, he would be the next rightful guy, but I have to give Prates the advantage over him as the next title shot because of what he's done. He's, like I said, he's beaten two former world champions since the last time Michael Morales even fought. And it's not all about just getting Islam beaten by any means necessary. I think it's better that especially with Islam, and he's all about the respect, right? Find the number one contender and bring them to me. We're going to kind of come to a general consensus that is the best guy in the world that doesn't have the belt, and I'll test my abilities against him. And when you have Michael Morales potentially jumping over Carlos Prates, it just sort of throws a wrench into that. So I think Carlos Prates, the fact that he's a superstar, the fact that his striking is the most lethal in the division, the fact that he's for sure going to bring the fight, unlike Ian Gary did, makes it the most interesting matchup for Islam next. And look, Morales doesn't have to worry, because Islam Makhachev told us, I've got 17 wins. It's no longer the Anderson Silva record. It's the Islam Makhachev record, but I'm not stopping at 17. I don't want to just itch out my competition by one fight. I want to take this record of 20 wins in a row all the way to 20 wins. So I think that Islam is probably going to be around at 170 for 3 more fights, and there's no way that anybody else is going to jump in front of Michael Morales, even if he has to wait after Carlos Prates.
Yeah, and that's a really good point about, making the fight against the number one rightful contender rather than the guy that the consensus thinks could beat Islam.
Right.
Like, I guess the perfect example of that would be, I would imagine if we polled our audience, do you think Quillen Salkeld could beat Justin Gaethje? I would assume probably more than 50% of people would say yes. Now, if I asked, do you think Paddy Pimblett could beat Justin Gaethje in a rematch? Probably most people would say no. But that doesn't mean that Quillen Salkeld now, with a Mateusz Gamrot win being his best victory, is now more important and up the line. So the meritocracy thing does make sense. And, speaking of meritocracies and working your way back into title contention, Glover Teixeira was on a recent interview where he said that the goal is still the same for Alex Pereira. It's the 3 championship belts.
Yep.
It's to stay at heavyweight. And if Josh Hokit, who's chirping a lot at Pereira, is the next fight, then that's the fight that we'll have. And so I think that we are going to see AP remain at 265, and his likely next opponent is going to be Josh Hokit, which is a massive fight, by the way.
Yeah, Alex Pereira versus Josh Hokit has to happen next. And I love that Alex Pereira isn't, still very upset and trying to, dispute the loss at the White House against Cyril Gane. I think that the fact that he's able to say, I need one win, and then basically the UFC will give me another title shot, is a perfect thing for him to do to end this year. I think into 2026, we should see Pereira, and I'd love to see Josh Hokit. It's only been a couple of months since we saw Josh Hokit at the White House, and from all the viral clips to the epic performance he had over Derek Lewis, I miss the guy. I want to see him back in action. And, love him or hate him, you can't turn your eyes away when he's on the TV. So I hope the UFC's heavyweight division's next big fight is Alex Pereira versus Josh Hokit. And look, if Josh can beat Alex Pereira, even though he hasn't had very many fights in the UFC, he's the guy that should challenge for the belt after that. But again, Alex Pereira is trying to make history. The UFC loves Alex Pereira. They want to see him become the first triple champion that the sport's ever seen. And I believe one win would get him right back into a title fight. You know, I know we have the Tom Aspinall return looming. Cyril Gane is obviously our champion right now. But Alex Pereira is such a big star. One win against a guy like Hokit, who has proven to be one of the best heavyweights in the world. And now he's also in the top 5. Certainly is enough for Alex Pereira to get his next title shot, and then obviously try to complete the history run of getting 3 belts. And for me, matchmaking wise, that is a home run. When I did Matchmaker Mondays, that was the fight that I came out with. I was like, all right, we got to see Josh Hokit face Alex Pereira. The promotional side's already done. They did that first press conference. I'm going to chama on your mama. That line was made famous there. He referred to Ilya and Alex as being like boyfriends, and he bird feeds him, all
the Josh Hokit stuff that he does.
Yeah. And by the way, Chael Sonnen also mentioned that Josh is sort of going to mold all 3 of these characters that he's kind of given to the public, from the down Vato to the shy, guy, and then also the incredible Hoaxster. He's going to mold them into one, or he's going to, maybe let us in on another personality. I don't know the story yet. I'm dying to find out what it is. And that's also another reason why I want to see him back in the cage soon, because I think Josh Hokit is must-see TV, and whatever it is that he's going to do next is going to ruffle feathers. It's going to piss a few people off. Us type of fans that just love the promotional side just as much as we love the fighting are going to for sure be on the ride for it. So I can't wait to see it. I hope at the end of this year, throw those guys on Madison Square Garden, or throw them on one of the numbered events to close out this year. That is a banger fight.
Yeah, and am I the only one that thinks it's a little weird that we got a full main card of UFC 333 announced, but not 332?
Very weird.
That kind of makes me. We haven't heard any Tom news. We haven't heard any Cyril news.
Right.
We got Glover now coming out talking about Hokit versus Pereira.
Yeah.
That almost makes me think that we're leading towards like a 332 being Gane versus Aspinall, and maybe, dare I even say, the co-main event could be the heavyweights in Hokit and Pereira. That way somebody's there in case something falls out of the main event. I don't know. I think there's something to be said for the fact that it's a little strange that the UFC gave us the full 333 card. We know that Eddie Hearn is now negotiating for Tom Aspinall. We know Dana and Eddie Hearn's relationship is not good. So is there a little gameplay and tactic going on behind the scene where it's like, you know what, Eddie, maybe there's some roadblocks in the negotiation. We're moving the train down the track. Here's 333. We'll announce 334 and 335, and we'll make a main event for 332 that doesn't involve your fighter. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I feel like there's something there, and I feel like 332 has heavyweight written all over it.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's got to be either heavyweight or interim title at light heavyweight that will headline UFC 332. For me, it's hard to say, right? People are kind of saying that Yuri Prochazka is back in camp, which makes you think, okay, well, what are we going to do? Ulberg is out until sometime middle next year. Is Paulo Costa already, a number 1 contender and eligible to fight for an interim title? He's a big star, and he's looked really damn good at 205 thus far. I could see that being an option. Also, Khamzat Chimaev and Sean Strickland. Are we going to get the rematch, or are we going to get Khamzat Chimaev up to 205? Because I think even though he's coming off a loss, there's a case to be made where Khamzat Chimaev may be the best 205er in the world and just needs to get an interim title so he can get the show on the road and fight Ulberg sometime next year. But I don't really know. Like, I would love to see Costa versus Khamzat as the interim title for UFC 332. I know that Khamzat was really hoping to get Sean Strickland in a rematch, and he was even willing to, change his body and his diet and his regular workout routine to stay at 185, which we all know was a really difficult cut for him, just one more time so he can get that belt. Now, then things get very weird, right? Because if he wins that fight, and now we've got 1-1 for him and Strickland, then we need to see a third one at 185, which means we have 2 more cuts to 185 for Khamzat. I don't think he wants to do that. I think the UFC is protecting Khamzat from himself and moreover the weight cuts, and I think we should slide him up at 205. I'm not even against giving Khamzat an interim title shot at 205, even though he's coming off the loss. He's a huge star. His skills are obviously very good. Sean Strickland is such a unique and tough guy to deal with. And the fight did not go Khamzat's way, but he did have some good moments in it. And I think at 205, he will have a speed advantage over almost everybody. I think his grappling sits above and beyond everybody at the top of that division. You know, light heavyweight right now kind of has a lot of strikers in it. So I don't really know what they're going to do, but Costa and Khamzat, for me, is the most exciting fight that they could possibly make for an interim title at 205. And I'm with you. Heavyweight could wind up being 332, but for some reason I have a feeling it might be getting pushed under the rug a little bit because it's an interim title and they haven't fully ironed it out.
Yeah, and then does heavyweight happen in December? You know, it's a lot of moving parts. I think Khamzat's pretty dead set on the Sean Strickland rematch. Yeah. I think he won, and I think I don't think he's going to give Sean a trilogy. I think if he wins, he's going to vacate, and then it's going to kind of leave 185 with a bit of a mess, but you know, there's enough contenders that they can clean it up pretty fast.
DDP and Imavov, right?
Exactly. Or, you know, or Sean and DDP for,
true.
You know, the third time, or, you know, however you can't really screw Imavov. The guy really does kind of deserve a shot. Let's move into the breaking news of today, right? So Yair Rodriguez has pulled out of Noche UFC.
What the hell?
33 years old. You know, really kind of just burning daylight with his prime here, you know, right in the middle of his prime. I think he's been in the UFC 12 or 13 years if memory serves me, and he's had 15 or 16 fights. So, you know, he's averaging less than 2 fights a year. Like if you want to get real mathematical, like 1.2 fights a year.
Yeah. And
he has long periods of inactivity. Man, there's calls that I'm seeing on social media today saying to just go ahead and cut him. And it wouldn't be the first time, right? He's been released from the UFC before and brought back. What do you make of El Pantera? I mean, we don't know. I was trying furiously to find why he's out of this fight before we sat down to record, but everything that I'm reading is just saying there hasn't been an official statement. Now, maybe by the time this video comes out, there will be a reason behind it, and then, you know, we can engage with the commentary about what that reason is. But as we sit here recording right now, Yair's out, and there's no explanation as to why.
Yeah, Yair versus Jean Silva was a perfect main event for Noche. And, you know, losing that match really does feel like a blow to the gut because it's a top-heavy card. You know, Noche was obviously a numbered event when it first started. And, you know, the Sugar Sean and Merab fight, that was huge. And this year it kind of feels like a diet version of Noche. But that's okay. They've got numbered events everywhere else, and you can't just dedicate one pay-per-view every single year, or numbered event, I should say now, to a Noche card. Maybe they're trying to grow in other markets as well. But Jean Silva versus Yair was the perfect fight. I thought everybody was really excited for the clash of styles, right? Jean Silva's got this insane power. Yair is a very electric, dynamic, unique striker that most people will never be able to imitate some of the skills and the techniques that he displays, but he's just not active enough, and pulling out of this fight is certainly not the way to get back in the good graces of the UFC. As you said, he's not active at all. I wouldn't be surprised if they're considering dropping him for good if he did back out of this and it's not something very severe. You know, John Silva doesn't really have anybody else to bring in.
They're saying Jose Delgado. That's what I'm reading. I don't know if that's confirmed yet, but they're saying that. And I mean, nothing against Jose Delgado, but like, Noche's kind of become an important thing.
Yeah.
And you kind of need a Mexican fighter to headline it, at least like a Diego Lopez, for example,
right.
Born in Brazil, but represents Mexico, somebody like that to headline the event. And Yair was the guy. Jose Delgado, I don't know if he has that pull yet to really headline a Noche event.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Brandon Moreno back in the queue, and I get that he's not who he was as a champion, but that's a former champion who had quite a run as a champion and a contender. So to have a guy like Jose Delgado get the main event slot over a guy like Brandon Moreno feels weird. Now, Yair and John together, that's a perfect opportunity to get a former champion on your undercard. But Jose Delgado versus John Silva sort of feels a little bit off. You know, I'm not mad at it. I hope John Silva can still compete. I hope they can salvage this card any way possible. But Yair Rodriguez isn't doing himself any favors. I don't know what the issue is this time, but if he doesn't get active or at least come up with some sort of good excuse, right? Charles Oliveira had to back out of his fight with Arman Tsarukyan, and he had a very good reason for that. Same with Ochoa.
Yeah.
You know, they're a very tight-knit group, and that was more than enough reason to not show up for your fight or have to back out in advance. But Noche's not too far away. and we just lost the main event. So I don't know who they're going to switch him out with. If Delgado's an option, I don't know if Kevin Vallejos has a fight right now, but I feel like he'd be a better fit against Jean Silva at this current time.
Yeah, I mean, not Mexican certainly, but Spanish speaking nonetheless.
Yeah.
And yeah, that would be a fun one. And you got to kind of feel bad for Jean Silva too, because it's like he was a win over Yair, who's fought for a belt before. A lot of people were thinking John's kind of knocking on the door. That probably gets you in the through the door and into a title fight. But yeah, beat Jose Delgado. Does that really move the needle for you? Or are you just taking a risk for not much reward? I think the UFC will reward him because they like his fighting style. And if he saves the card, they'll still give him a title fight. But yeah, let's move into a little
Arman Tsarukyan.
Yeah. So
Batman. By the way, he has officially changed his name, his fight name. I don't remember what it was. It was some Armenian word. Now he is Arman Batman Tsarukyan, which he's been at RAF now for several fights, I think since he started with RAF, but he is officially going to walk out to She Wanna Be With an Indian by Neon. It's a rap song that the streamer Neon created, and he is going to be announced as Arman Batman Tsarukyan. So I can't wait for that fight. And look, I was excited for the Charles Oliveira rematch, but I was never like, as soon as they announced Charles versus Arman Part 2, when they said it's going to be 5 rounds, but there's not going to be a belt on the line, no BMF option for Arman, and you know, all the stuff that came with it, I was like, it sort of feels like he just ran back into Charles Oliveira and there's nobody else timing-wise that he could fight. And then you pull Charles Oliveira out for good reason, of course, and then you bring Mauricio Ruffy in. It's a totally different style fight, but a very interesting one. And I get that Ruffy has never gotten a title shot yet. I get that, you know, he has a big deficit on the ground, and Arman's probably going to be able to exploit that, take him to the ground as long as he can stay safe on the feet. But Arman versus Ruffy is very interesting because it's a very clear #1 contender fight for one man. I don't think if Ruffy beats Arman that he draws into Justin Gaethje, but I think Arman Tsarukyan beating Ruffy would absolutely be the nail in the coffin, or the final statement that Arman needs to make ever since he backed out of the title fight with Islam Makhachev a couple of years ago. You know, he's been in timeout with the UFC. He hasn't, you know, done anything to really upset them. Obviously the headbutt, but everything else that he's done outside of the UFC has just gained his popularity. It's made him more famous. The UFC and Dana White himself even came out and said, I love what Arman's doing with Nina Drama. I love all the content he's coming out with. He's becoming the most interesting man in the world, and we love to have stuff like that. So I think Arman is back in the good graces. They just want to see him active, and they know that the champion Justin Gaethje isn't looking to fight until 2027. So Arman has to do this again, but once again, he's showing us he wants to stay active. 12 matches since his last fight in the UFC, whether it's submission grappling, wrestling, whatever it is, he is staying very active. And the fact that he doesn't really care. You want to give me the most dangerous striker in our division in Mauricio Ruffy? No problem. I'll take that as a co-main event. And even though I'm already the #1 contender, I'll just solidify the point one more time and take out your most dangerous striker in Ruffy.
Well, what Arman said that was interesting to me was that Charles Oliveira can't knock him out and Mauricio Ruffy can.
Yeah.
And that makes it more of a dangerous fight. Now, that helps sell the fight because a lot of people know that Charles Oliveira contended with Arman in the grappling when they fought the first time.
Right.
A lot of people thought that had that fight continued another couple of rounds, that Charles Oliveira probably would have won it. Now, so making the convincing argument that this is a rematch that's worth watching because it's very evenly matched is very easy to do. Now, a lot of people are thinking Arman's going to walk all over Ruffy, so I think he's doing a good job in selling the fight, if it's nothing else.
Yeah.
Just to say that, and he's right about that, by the way.
Yeah.
Ruffy is not Charles on the ground.
No.
Make no mistake about that. But Charles is not Ruffy when it comes to striking, with the accuracy, with the power, with the ability to be creative. Mauricio Ruffy brings an interesting wrinkle to the game that Arman Tsarukyan is going to have to contend with. And he said, my dad gets nervous when I fight, so I want to end this fight as fast as possible. You don't want to be on the feet mixing it up with Ruffy for too long. We saw him dismantle Michael Chandler. Now, can Arman get him down and hold him down and maybe submit him? I think that's probably what most people will think, and maybe my prediction is leaning more towards that. We'll do tape study, obviously, and do deeper dives into this fight. But I'm actually really looking forward to the fight. Contrary to a lot of popular belief, I think that Ruffy's working on what he needs to work on as far as takedown defense. Is there enough time? I don't know. We're going to find out. That's the beautiful thing about this sport. But for every second that fight is on the feet, it's dangerous for Arman Tsarukyan.
Yeah, Ruffy is such an exciting guy. And I love that he said, Charles Oliveira is the harder fight for me, but Mauricio Ruffy is a much more dangerous fight for me. And, you know, he doesn't want to get out there and just mix it up on the feet with Ruffy, because we saw what happened to Chandler when he was trying to do that. And we know that Chandler's not the wrestler that Arman Tsarukyan is, but he didn't even have an option to change levels and close distance on Ruffy. There was no opportunity for that whatsoever. Arman's striking is actually underrated. He's good with his kicks. He's like Team Khabib. You get Islam and them. They are totally fine to stand and strike with you because they know you're not going to shoot a takedown on them. Like, we know Arman Tsarukyan doesn't need to work his sprawls and stuffing takedowns now that he's signed to fight Mauricio Ruffy. Mauricio Ruffy is a smart guy. He's not going to close distance and try to take Arman down, because that would be a world of trouble for him that would likely end as soon as the fight got to the ground. I think Arman's skills on the ground are next level. We're seeing a lot of wrestling out of him, but his jiu-jitsu and his submission skills are very high level. And I'm excited to see how this fight goes, because if Ruffy can come out with the same confidence he had at the White House, I mean, the biggest stage the UFC's ever put on, and he didn't have any pre-fight jitters. I didn't see any sort of issue or nerves out of him, and he went and dismantled Michael Chandler. If he can beat Arman Tsarukyan with how big a star Arman is right now, I mean, now you're talking about the Brazilian Conor McGregor for the lightweight division. His striking is, similar, the stance of vintage Conor, not the boxer-style Conor. Yeah, and I don't predict for you that if he throws a jumping kick that he's going to tear his ACL when he lands, but I actually really like the fight, and I was only intrigued in the Charles Oliveira rematch for Arman because of the 5 rounds. But I also thought there needed to be a belt on it. The BMF had an opportunity to be put up on the line, but they were basically very quick to say BMF is not on the line, but it will be 5 rounds. So it's an indication that they're prepping Arman Tsarukyan for 5-round environments, which obviously means he's going to be fighting for a world title if he can beat Mauricio Ruffy. I just can't wait to see that one.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So did you...
can I add one more thing? Arman Tsarukyan didn't forget to mention Ilia Topuria when he was doing the interview with Chael leading up to 331. So he said, they asked, what do you think? Chael said, what do you think Ilia Topuria should do next? He goes, Ilia suffered a pretty bad loss. I think if he wants to get a win, he's going to need to fight somebody like Michael Chandler. And it's almost like there was like a secondary...
How insulting.
Insulting towards Chael Sonnen. He's like, wait, you really think he needs to go that far out of the queue? Ilia Topuria, the former world champion, the guy who was pound for pound #1, and he suffered his first loss of his entire pro career, and you think he needs to go all the way back and fight Michael Chandler? But Arman Tsarukyan knows what he's doing.
Just throw him on Contender Series and see if he can earn his contract back. And that's
Exactly.
hilarious. But, speaking of Contender Series, did you see that just insane knockout in the main event last night?
Yes, man. And not a technical one, but a couple of heavy hooks, and one of them got the job done. That was a brutal KO.
And that guy,
Nazo? Is it Nazo?
So Kayak Brito, I believe, is the guy that got the knockout, and Namo Fazil is the guy. This guy has a big following. I had never heard of him until a couple of weeks ago with the build-up.
He's commented on a couple of our videos, as a matter of fact, on TikTok.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
He talks a lot of smack, this guy. He said some really odd things about Islam Dulatov, and Islam Dulatov actually said that, I won't mention what he said, that's not what we talk about over here at the Barnhill Brothers, but Brito is getting apparently $5,000 from Islam Dulatov for getting that knockout victory. Apparently that was very satisfying for Dulatov to see. But this guy Fazil, I thought he was going to bury his head in the sand. The guy's already back on social media trying to take the loss on the chin, but it's hard when you talk the way he talked building up to this fight.
Yeah.
Saying that Khabib is going to be a nobody by the time he's done. Islam Makhachev. This guy was you could tell he was doing it for the clicks, and he had a big social media following prior to the Contender Series fight. But man, did he ever, eat a big old slice of humble pie at the hands of Kaike Brito last night in Contender Series.
We may have a new king of cringe in Namo Fazil. Now, obviously, he didn't get a UFC contract after losing on Contender Series, but he's the kind of guy that just wants to ruffle feathers and piss people off. Remember, after he fought on Jake Paul's MVP card, he got out into the crowd and got in Arman Tsarukyan's face. And that was, a viral moment for him. And I'll never knock a guy for trying trying to do a little business and hype things up. But realistically, Jake Paul saw him as a guy that he could grow an MVP, and Arman Tsarukyan is now we're sitting at about 12 months where he's the number one contender in the UFC. So there was realistically no shot that Namo Fazil was ever going to fight Arman Tsarukyan unless he could somehow get to the UFC and then go on a crazy win streak. Now, he got his contender opportunity, but that didn't go his way. He got highlight reeled, and I don't know what's going to happen for him. Obviously, Dana gave him an opportunity. He missed the ball, and now he's going to have to go back somewhere else, but there's not that many options, so he may have to go hat in hand back to Jake Paul and say, hey, it didn't go my way over on Contender Series. Can I please get a job back here for whatever you decide to put on a second card?
Well, you gotta imagine Dana White loved every bit of that, because it's like one of the guys that was the bigger stars. It's not as far as name recognition, but garnering attention with what he said at the pressers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
On the Jake Paul MVP card, comes over and gets slimed out on Contender Series in spectacular fashion. But Brito, I mean, credit to this guy. This guy, it was a fun fight while it lasted. He swung for the fences. I don't think that he could hit that shot again. It wasn't like the most beautifully technical shot in the world.
He was looking at the ground when he threw both hooks. The first one missed by a country mile. Somehow the second one landed flush.
And that was lights out. Nobody could eat that shot.
No.
So, I mean, it's not like Namo's got a glass chin or anything, but, you put that shot on a horse, you're probably knocking him out.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. Let's talk a little bit about Deen the Great and Henry Cejudo.
Okay.
So our last topic of the day before I get your thoughts on RoboCop versus Fluffy.
Yes.
Now, guys, by the way, I will give my full predictions on tomorrow night. If you're watching this Wednesday, this is going to come out on Wednesday. Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central Time, Moneyball MMA and myself go live, and we do about an hour and a half live stream predicting every fight on the card, starting from the earliest prelim all the way to the main event. So I will reserve my prediction for that. Make sure you come back. That's a really fun live stream, and those have been growing week over week.
But I'll give you my Fluffy and RoboCop today.
That's right. But before we do that, Deen the Great, Henry Cejudo. Deen the Great is coming out saying, I want to be seen as a legitimate boxer. And now my argument to that is, okay, so you pick an almost 40-year-old, 5'2" wrestler
that was the champion of 125.
That was the champion of the 125 and 135 division, and that's supposed to legitimize you because you have a quote-unquote UFC champion on your record. Now, it would be fantastic to see Henry Cejudo come and flip the script on him.
Right.
Will that happen? Probably not, because this is a boxing match, and all of the tools that Henry has that are his best tools, he has to leave at home. What do you make of this? And then I know Bobby Green, they had some stuff going on with him as far as like he sparred their pro boxer that was like 19-1 and tuned him up. And then they were like, well, how about this guy who's 33-1? And that guy actually was better than Bobby. But then that guy agreed to do some MMA rounds with Bobby. Now, there's always something going on in the Deen the Great, Adrian Broner streaming sphere.
Yeah, Deen the Great and Adrian Broner, their live stream has become like the modern day version of a soap opera. Now, it is just a ratchet, wild show to the highest level. Every day, they're doing something to go viral, whether it's the police breaking into their house for whatever it is that they're doing, or they're sparring people, or they're fighting, or they're getting too drunk, or Adrian Broner's puking in his own hands because he's too drunk in the back of an Escalade or whatever. These guys are viral machines to the highest level. So I'm really happy that Cejudo is able to go to the Misfits and get a high profile fight. I think a lot of eyes will be on this. And Deen the Great is getting better as an influencer in boxing. Like, he's hanging out with a four division world champion in Adrian Broner. Now, Adrian is a mess right now.
He may be 3 sheets to the wind most days, but he still was a 4-division world champion.
But that pull counter that he can still hit to this day, even with the gut, the way it sits, man, he's still lightning fast with it. And obviously, Deen the Great is a good student. He knows how to learn on the job. I think he's a visual learner. But I'm excited to see, because Henry Cejudo comes from wrestling, right? Olympic gold medalist. Whenever you talk about the most accomplished martial artist of all time or combat sports athlete, Henry Cejudo belongs in the top 5, right? 2-division champion in the UFC, Olympic gold medal. That right there tells you everything you need to know. Now he wants to try his hand in boxing. I think he understands that he can't compete with real boxers, but this influencer space is actually pretty interesting. It's pretty popular. Guys like Deen the Great are as big as they've ever been right now, and they want to fight. So Henry Cejudo's not afraid. He could possibly bring the dog out and just force Deen the Great into a brawl, right? He could get real small, get real compact, close distance, get inside and make it really nasty in the dirty boxing range, which Deen the Great probably wouldn't like. And if you go back and sort of look at the training partner, who is, I think Bang Williams was his name, who boxed Bobby Green, he wanted to do Queensberry boxing. I jab a little, I'll move, you jab a little. Bobby Green came with his hands down like this, hands in the pocket, as we always say, and he was just bum rushing him, and he'd knock him, do a little shoulder bump and then hit him with a hook, and he was just sort of teeing off on this 19-1 boxer. And Deen the Great is really falling in love with boxing, and it's a beautiful sport. It's very clean. It looks so nice when you get two high-level boxers and they're moving together, even in sparring. It's so fun to watch. But when you throw an MMA guy into that equation, things get messy very quickly, because the range is different, where the punches come from is different, the timing and tempo is totally different. And Bobby Green gave Bang Williams everything he could deal with and then some. I mean, he mopped the floor with him, and the body language on Adrian Broner, who was silent as those rounds were going on, and Deen the Great, who wouldn't give Bobby Green a compliment, even though he was tuning up his friend. And every time his friend would whiff on a punch, Deen the Great would be like, "Oh man, that one would have got you," or "Oh man, that was clean." Whatever. They just didn't want to give Bobby his credit. But I think that Henry Cejudo coming in and getting real aggressive and forcing Deen the Great to just get into a dogfight is his best chance to win, because I think Deen the Great's boxing skills are getting better. Everybody can look good on the mitts if you take enough time, but when you want to look good in sparring and you want to look good under the bright lights, you do have to get years of good rounds and that sensitivity to getting hit and being in dogfights. And I think Henry Cejudo's best chance is to just make this as ugly as possible.
Yeah, and even still, I mean, they must just be paying Henry a bag to do this. He's 5'2", 5'3", and his boxing's not his thing. He's got short arms. Deen the Great should win this fight. And then, he's going to set himself up for, hey, I beat a former UFC champion and, 2-division champion. And but I see where they're going with it. You know?
And I don't want to just pile on the boxers, because this Barboza character, Arnold Barboza, I think is his name, he sparred with Bobby Green, and that video went viral. I think it was about a week after Deen the Great and Adrian did that sparring session for Bobby at their gym. And Barboza put the screws to Bobby Green. I mean, he was fighting like a real boxer. He was moving like a guy who's got a 33-1 professional record with a WBO world title attached to him. Very skilled, and Bobby's hands down did not bode well for him in that situation. Barboza was able to land at will, put a lot of hands on Bobby. Now, Bobby took the shots pretty well, and he landed a couple things on his own, little trick shots, little veteran moves. But the fact that Barboza is down to get into a MMA cage or just grapple and do a bit of MMA sparring with Bobby Green is so cool to me. This is all we've ever wanted from the boxers, right? Just look, we love y'all's sport. We hope that you guys like our sport, but let's just have some fun. Like, we don't want to beat each other up. This is just sparring. Let's just, I want to show you what I can do to you, because you've just shown me what you can do to me in a boxing set. So let's just add all the rest of my tools, my elbows, my knees, the grappling, the kicks. And Bobby Green got Barboza to agree to that. Now, he didn't say, let's spar right now. Bobby Green kind of took the initiative and got to his back in about 2 seconds and choked him out. So he understands that he has no chance to beat Bobby Green in an MMA sparring session. But he goes, give me 2 weeks to go work with somebody who knows MMA, and then we'll do a live stream together, me and Bobby, and we're going to, have a little round. And I think it's taking place today. So I will for sure be tuning in. I haven't seen it yet, but Barboza deserves all the credit, in my opinion, because he's actually down to, take his limitations.
Get in there and do cage fighting with a cage fighter, which is basically what we've been asking for since the inception of all this stuff that's happened with boxing and MMA crossover. Now, let's get to the final topic of the day. Your thoughts, RoboCop versus Fluffy. Sacramento fight week. Anthony Hernandez now training with Sean Strickland. Spent a lot of time at Extreme Couture this camp. RoboCop is a good fighter, trying to get himself into that elite discussion. Not there yet. Fluffy, trying to build himself back after, being just kind of outclassed by Sean Strickland.
Yeah.
Where do you land on this one? Who you taking?
So Fluffy Hernandez is a cardio machine, and it really does take a guy like Sean Strickland to slow a guy like Hernandez down. But RoboCop is a more stationary power puncher. He likes to plant his feet, throw his big shots. He's not this versatile mover with a ton of agility on display. But Fluffy Hernandez is so good at taking the fight as it comes to him, and he's totally down to strike with you, and he can mix in the shot attempts really well. His cage work is brutal. When you finish a round with Fluffy Hernandez and he probably got the 10 and you got the 9, that you're exhausted after that round. Fluffy Hernandez is still one of the best 185ers in the world. He just can't beat the upper echelon in the world champions. But RoboCop is there to be hit. He's there to be taken down. And I don't predict for you that Fluffy will be able to, just close distance and take him down easily. But I think the fact that he mixes the martial arts really well, he throws a lot of volume with his hands, he's down to kick, he's a scrapper to the highest level. And just when you think you've got him, basically agreeing to a standing striking match, that's when he changes levels, takes you down. And the chain wrestling is where he sort of drowns you. And a lot of people at 185 have a hard time dealing with the pace that Fernandez that Fluffy brings into the cage. I think RoboCop is going to run into that same problem. Now, he has the great equalizer. One single shot from RoboCop can certainly put somebody, into the shadow realm, as you like to say. But I think RoboCop is going to be one step behind for most of this fight. The fact that it's 5 rounds, I lean heavy towards Fluffy because I think both guys will be able to get some offense going early on, but it's all about pace and cardio at the end of the day, especially in 5-round fights. And I think Fluffy Hernandez is going to do enough. I'm kind of leaning decision because I just think RoboCop's a pretty durable guy. Fluffy's really crafty and creative with how to scramble if he does wind up in a bad position. But I'm going to go 48-47. Fluffy Hernandez beats RoboCop.
There we go. And guys, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Central Time, I will give you my predictions, not on that fight, but every single fight on UFC Sacramento. So make sure you come back to that. Moneyball MMA and myself have cooked up some good predictions for you, as well as some really nice graphics. Shout out Chris Rovey and the editing team for putting together some amazing graphics for all of these live streams. And until then, guys, have a wonderful day.
Peace.